Picture a man in a small forager band who starts taking more than his share. He bullies the weaker hunters out of their kills. He forces himself on other men's wives. He struts around the camp like he already owns it. In the story you've probably absorbed from movies and textbooks, this is exactly the kind of man who should have thrived in the ancient world. The biggest, boldest, most aggressive guy in the group. The one everybody else falls in line behind. Here's the thing nobody tells you. In real hunter-gatherer societies, documented directly by anthropologists, that man frequently ended up dead, killed by the very people he thought he was dominating, and the decision to kill him was often made collectively, calmly, and with his own family sometimes voting in favor. So let's actually answer the question properly. Why did ancient humans punish criminals, and what does the way they did it tell us about the entire foundation of human society? Let that sink in for a second, because the honest answer completely inverts the popular image of ancient justice as simple, brutal might makes right. Let's start with the man who spent decades actually studying this. Christopher Boehm was an American anthropologist at the University of Southern California who also directed the Jane Goodall Research Center, which meant he spent years watching chimpanzee politics at Gombe, alongside Goodall herself, before turning that same close, patient attention toward human hunter-gatherer societies. Boehm compiled ethnographic records from 48 separate nomadic forager bands, spanning Africa, the Americas, and Southeast Asia, populations with no shared culture or direct contact with each other, and found something genuinely striking. Every single one of them had developed remarkably similar systems for controlling exactly one specific type of person, the individual trying to dominate everyone else. Boehm called his theory reverse dominance hierarchy, and the core idea is a direct inversion of what most people assume about primate social structure. In chimpanzee troops, and in most primate societies generally, a small number of individuals dominate the larger group through raw strength and aggression. Boehm's research found that human hunter-gatherer bands consistently did the opposite. Instead of the strong dominating the many banded together to dominate anyone who tried to become too strong. Humans, in other words, still carried the same underlying drive toward dominance and status you'd see in any other primate. What changed was the direction the group's collective power got pointed. And this system wasn't improvised on the spot. It followed a genuine escalation ladder, remarkably consistent across cultures with zero contact with each other. First, gossip. Long before any formal confrontation, word would spread quietly through the group about someone's selfish or domineering behavior. A kind of early warning system that let the entire band form a shared opinion before anyone had to act on it directly. Second, if the behavior continued, came teasing and ridicule, pointed, public mockery specifically targeting the exact transgression, designed to embarrass the offender back into line without anyone needing to raise a hand. Third, if ridicule failed, came shunning and ostracism, a deliberate, collective withdrawal of social contact. In a species that depends entirely on cooperation to survive, being cut off from the group wasn't a minor inconvenience. It was a genuine, serious threat. Fourth, for offenses ridicule and shunning couldn't fix, came outright banishment, physical expulsion from the band entirely, sending someone out to survive alone in an environment where survival without a group was, for most of human history, extraordinarily difficult. And fifth, only when every other option had genuinely failed, came execution. Here's where the specific documented cases stop being abstract theory and start being genuinely uncomfortable to sit with. Among the Kapauku, a group studied directly by Boehm, wealthy men who accumulated resources without sharing generously enough could be reprimanded, ostracized, and, in serious enough cases, executed. Crucially, that execution decision wasn't handed down by a single ruler or chief. It was made collectively, by the entire group. And Boehm's research specifically notes that even the offender's own family members were sometimes included in that decision. Among the Baruya, another group in Boehm's survey, a man who had appropriated his neighbor's livestock and forced other men's wives into sex was, in Boehm's own account, subsequently killed by his own people. Not by a court, not by a king, by the community itself, acting together. Let that land for a second. This wasn't chaotic mob violence. It was calculated, considered, and specifically reserved for people who had already been given multiple earlier chances to correct their behavior through gossip, ridicule, and shunning first. Now, it's worth stepping back and asking why any of this would matter enough to actually kill someone over. And the answer connects directly to something considerably bigger than any single misbehaving individual. Primatologist Richard Wrangham, building on exactly this body of research, has proposed that this pattern of collectively punishing and executing aggressive, domineering individuals may have functioned as a genuine, sustained evolutionary force across an enormous span of human history, working specifically against reactive, impulsive violence. Wrangham's argument, sometimes described under the label of human self-domestication, is that over roughly 2,000 generations, something in the range of 50,000 years, repeatedly removing the most aggressive, most domineering individuals from the reproductive pool would have gradually shifted the entire species toward calmer, more cooperative, more socially tolerant behavior. The same broad pattern researchers observe when comparing domesticated animals to their wilder ancestors. Under this theory, the group execution of a violent bully wasn't only solving an immediate local problem, it may have been quietly, slowly, shaping which temperament traits got passed forward into the next generation of the entire species. That's a genuinely significant claim, and it's worth pausing here for the honest caveat this topic deserves. Not every researcher accepts Boehm's framework without pushback. Anthropologists David Erdahl and Andrew Whiten proposed an alternative concept they called counter-domination, arguing the underlying social principle operating in these societies was something closer to a shared expectation that no single adult gets to control others, rather than Boehm's more specific picture of a coordinated hierarchy actively working in reverse. The academic debate between these framings is still genuinely active. What both sides agree on, though, is the underlying observed behavior itself. Hunter-gatherer societies across the world consistently developed real, structured mechanisms for controlling individuals who tried to dominate the group, escalating carefully from social pressure all the way up to lethal force when nothing gentler worked. There's a smaller, almost comedic example buried in Boehm's research that's genuinely worth including, because it shows this same underlying instinct operating even in low-stakes, everyday situations. Among the Wape, a horticultural group in New Guinea, men would play a communal dice game together, and the group enforced a specific, deliberate rule. A player who won too much wasn't allowed to simply leave the game and walk away with his winnings. He had to keep playing until his winnings shrank back down closer to everyone else's. That's the exact same underlying leveling instinct, applied to something as trivial as a dice game, because even mild, accumulating advantage was treated as something the group needed to actively correct before it became a genuine problem. So put this together, and a genuinely coherent picture starts to form. Ancient humans didn't punish criminals primarily to satisfy anger, or revenge, or even to protect specific individual victims, although those motivations certainly played some role too. The deeper, more consistent pattern documented across 48 separate, unconnected societies points towards something considerably more structural. Punishment functioned as a deliberate mechanism for actively preventing the exact kind of runaway dominance hierarchy that characterizes almost every other primate social system on Earth. Gossip, ridicule, shunning, banishment, and finally, execution weren't separate, unrelated behaviors. They were graduated steps on a single, consistent ladder, built and maintained collectively, specifically to keep any one individual from accumulating enough power to control everyone else. Which brings us back to the actual question. Why did ancient humans punish criminals? Because the alternative, a small band of early humans quietly allowing the strongest, most aggressive individual to simply dominate everyone else without consequence, was very plausibly incompatible with the kind of large-scale, high-trust cooperation our species eventually needed to survive at all. The group that punished its bullies effectively could share food fairly, cooperate on difficult hunts, and hold together through genuinely hard seasons. The group that couldn't, very possibly, simply didn't last long enough to leave descendants behind to tell the story. That instinct, the quiet, collective discomfort you feel watching someone try to dominate a group that hasn't given them the right to, the urge to gossip about it, to quietly push back, to make sure nobody gets away with taking more than their fair share, might be considerably older and considerably more foundational to who you are than you ever would have guessed.